The Galactic Senate had a room for emergencies. It was buried 12 levels below Centaur Prime, behind doors built to stop railgun fire, beneath a chamber where senators usually spoke in polished voices about treaties, budgets, and border disputes. Tonight, nobody sounded polished. The walls were lined with screens that were never meant to go dark, because somewhere in the galaxy something was always breaking. Piracy, rebellion, hunger, collapsing governments. Small wars that could be contained with patrols, pressure, and signatures on official paper. But the room had not been used for a full emergency session in 41 years. It is being used now. Grand Senator Voreth of the Kelari stood at the center of the floor and watched 7 Imperial ships die for the 5th time. He was broad-shouldered, gray-green skinned, and old enough to remember when fear had a smell. He had survived 3 wars, 2 collapses of member governments, and decades of negotiations where one wrong sentence could move fleets. He did not rattle easily. He was rattled. "Run it again," he said. Behind him, Relic hesitated. She was young, Tasani, exact in all things, and in 2 years of service, she had never once questioned his order. Her fingers hovered above the console, but her eyes stayed on the frozen image of the debris field. "Grand Senator," she said carefully, "we have already verified the telemetry 7 times. Voreth did not turn around. "Run it again." Relic obeyed. The footage began with the KTH system, a quiet place of dead planets, cold stone, and no civilian traffic. It had been chosen for its emptiness. No witnesses, no inhabited moon, no families watching from a dome city while the Imperial Navy did what Imperial procedure demanded. Only an unregistered vessel, smaller than the cruiser sent to destroy it. 8 months earlier, that vessel had crossed the edge of Kelari space without registry, without transponder, and without any identification the Empire could understand. When hailed, it answered in a language that required 3 weeks to translate. When the translation came, it was not a threat. It was worse. "We are going home. We do not stop for inspections." The sentence moved through command channels like an insult with engines. The Empire had protocols. You hailed. You waited. You boarded. If a vessel refused, you escorted it under armed guard. If it resisted escort, you destroyed it. This vessel had resisted, not loudly, not with declarations. It had damaged 2 escort frigates, just enough to break pursuit, then continued on its original heading as if Imperial authority were weather. Fleet Admiral Sun answered with pride dressed as discipline. 7 ships. The cruiser Undying Reach. 2 destroyers. 3 heavy frigates. 1 electronic warfare vessel. 142 trained crew. The mission file called it routine suppression. Estimated engagement duration, 12 minutes. Voreth watched the Undying Reach transmit the final warning. 30 seconds to cut engines. 30 seconds to power down weapons. 30 seconds to become manageable. The unknown ship did not surrender. It turned. That was the first thing no model could explain. The vessel moved wrong. Not clumsy, not graceful. Wrong. It changed vector with a violence that should have torn its frame open. It crossed space, as if inertia were a rule written for other ships. The Undying Reach fired first. For primary batteries, 2 torpedo spreads. Enough force to cripple vessels twice its mass. The salvo hit nothing. Then the smaller ship fired back. The most decorated cruiser in the 5th Fleet came apart in 11 seconds. No slow death. No final formation. One moment, it was a warship with medals, repair logs, sleeping quarters, and private messages waiting for crew who would never read them. The next moment it was heat, vapor, and debris. In the emergency room, nobody moved. On the screen, the destroyers tried to flank. The frigates spread into crossfire. The electronic warfare vessel began its jamming pattern. The unknown ship ignored all of it. It moved through the battle group unhurried, not like a beast hunting, but like a damaged machine finishing work it could not avoid. Each pass ended with another Imperial signature vanishing from the tactical display. Hammerclaw lasted 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Sunder lasted 2. The frigates died close together. The electronic warfare vessel lasted longest, not because it was the strongest, but because the unknown ship seemed to leave it for last. Then the system went quiet. 7 ships were gone. The unknown vessel was wounded. Drone sensors showed heat blooms along its hull and internal damage severe enough that any Imperial captain would have called for rescue. It did not call. It turned back onto its original course. It kept going home. Vorith stopped the footage. Senator Marin of the Draith finally spoke, her voice low enough that the screens seemed louder than she was. "What is that ship?" Vorith opened the translation report. The language was new, not a dialect, not a trade tongue, not related to any cataloged Imperial language. But Relic had found one useful thing. During the second hailing exchange, the crew had spoken the ship's name. 3 analysts had translated it differently, but each answer circled the same meaning: persistent, enduring, the one that does not stop. Relic had then done something smarter than the senior analysts. She had stopped searching language archives and searched the stars instead. She plotted the ships heading backward and forward, past Kelari space, past neutral zones, past unmapped regions, until the line ended at an old catalog entry, SL227G. 1 yellow star, 8 planets, 1 large moon around the third world. The original survey was 230 years old. It described primitive inhabitants, combustion engines, early fixed-wing aircraft, no atomic power, no faster-than-light travel, and no threat. Vorith stared at the frozen image of the small angular ship beside the remains of the undying Reach. "How long," he asked, "does it take a civilization to go from atmospheric flight to that?" No one answered, because every empire kept records of what was possible, and this was not in them. At last, Vorith turned away from the screen. "Send a diplomatic mission," he said. "Not military, not armed." Marin looked at him. "Careful of what? We do not even know what they are." Vorith looked one last time at the debris field where 142 Imperial crew had become a lesson no one understood. "That is exactly why," he said 3 weeks later. The careful word dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of SL-227G and immediately went silent. It was the most sophisticated first contact vessel the Empire had ever built, which meant it had been designed to look harmless while surviving the consequences of being misunderstood. It carried linguists, xenobiologists, cultural analysts, medical officers, communications engineers, and a captain chosen for calm hands. It carried no offensive weapons. Grand Senator Vorith had been very clear about that. The last Imperial ships sent toward this civilization had gone with guns. 142 people had not returned. Ambassador Shra stood on the bridge and watched the yellow star burn in the distance. She was Kelari, younger than Vorith, but not young enough to believe training could remove fear. It only taught fear where to stand. "Passive scan only," she said. "Nothing active. Nothing they could mistake for targeting." The navigation officer confirmed, and the careful word began listening to the system without touching it. At first, the third planet looked exactly like the old survey described. Blue oceans, green landmasses, white cloud systems, 1 large moon. From a distance, it could have been any developing world the Empire had catalogued and forgotten. Then the passive scan found metal. Shra watched the count climb. 40 orbital structures. 80. 120. The bridge grew quieter with every number. The count stopped at 217 objects large enough to be stations, yards, platforms, habitats, or military infrastructure. Centaur Prime, the administrative heart of the Empire, had 43 orbital installations. This forgotten planet had 217. Population estimate, Shra said. The ship AI compared the 230-year-old survey to growth projections, energy output, atmospheric signatures, night-side illumination, and orbital traffic. The number appeared. 8 billion on the planet, possibly another 100 million above it. Nobody said anything for several seconds. That silence told Shra more than any report could. She had heard nervous crews speak too much. She had heard frightened crews joke too loudly. This silence was worse. This was trained professionals trying to rebuild reality in their own minds and finding that several load-bearing pieces were missing. Traffic analysis, she said. The map filled slowly. Civilian craft moved between planet and orbit. Cargo ships crossed toward mining operations in the asteroid belt. Smaller vessels came and went from habitats with the ordinary rhythm of a civilization that had not merely reached space, but had made it inconveniently domestic. Then the military signatures appeared. 11 probable warships, several larger than the careful word. One was so massive the AI took 3 minutes to calculate its mass. When the number appeared, Lieutenant Commander Holt leaned forward, then stopped himself. "That cannot be right," he said. The xenobiologist answered without looking away from the display. "The AI does not make that kind of error on mass readings." Shra read the number again. The largest human vessel in the system massed 4 times more than the Empire's largest dreadnought. She straightened her diplomatic sash, because her hands needed something to do that did not look like fear. "Prepare first contact transmission," she said. "Identity, purpose, peaceful intent. Use the language recovered from the vessel." Holt looked at her. "And if they answer with weapons?" Shra kept her eyes on the blue planet. "Then we will learn something important very quickly." The careful word transmitted. On Earth, in a windowless building in Geneva, with no name on the exterior door, Petty Officer Danny Reeves almost missed the end of history. She was 12 hours into a shift built mostly from static, sensor drift, distant stellar noise, and the dull patience required to watch nothing happen. Deep space monitoring was not glamorous. Most days, the galaxy had the courtesy to remain empty. Then a signal repeated across her console. Structured, artificial, unknown. Reeves sat up so fast her chair rolled backward and hit the desk behind her. Her hands moved before her fear did. She ran the signal through standard filters. They failed. She ran it through the advanced xenolinguistic processor, reserved for possibilities everyone trained for and nobody expected to see during a night shift. The processor worked for 40 seconds. Then it gave her a rough translation. "We come in peace. We are the Kelari diplomatic mission aboard the vessel Careful Word. We seek contact with the civilization of this system. We mean no harm. We ask only to speak." Reeves stared at the words. For 3 full seconds, she did not breathe. Then she hit the alarm. Within 6 minutes, the room had 30 people in it. Within 12, the deputy director was on a secure line to Geneva Command. Within 20, a general was being woken in Brussels. Within 3 hours, every major government on Earth knew that the sky had spoken. Within 6 hours, the argument began. Who answered? What language? Civilian or military? Apology first? Accusation first? Silence first? Someone suggested waiting. Someone else asked what waiting meant when an alien diplomatic vessel was already sitting at the edge of the system. 47 hours later, the Careful Word received humanity's reply. Shra read it once. Then again. It was calm, precise, and worse than anger. "We received your message. We have questions. Our first question is this. Why did your warships attack one of ours?" The first human question stayed on the Careful Word like a pressure change. "Why did your warships attack one of ours?" Ambassador Shra did not answer immediately. She had spent her career inside difficult rooms. She knew the difference between a question asked for information and a question placed on a table like a blade. This was both. It did not accuse. It did not beg. It simply required the Empire to look at its own actions without the comfort of ceremony. Her first draft sounded too defensive. Her second sounded too weak. Her third sounded like law hiding behind language. She deleted all three. For hours later, after 6 revisions and 3 consultations with her chief linguist, she sent the cleanest answer she could make. She explained the Empire's protocols for unregistered vessels. She explained the escort order, the damaged frigates, the escalation to Fleet Admiral Sun, and the battle group sent to KDH. She did not call it an accident. She did not apologize in the first message, not because she lacked regret, but because first contact was full of traps, and some civilizations heard apology as surrender. What she wrote instead was more dangerous. The Empire did not understand what it was dealing with. The outcome was not what the Empire intended. The reply came 19 hours later. It was longer. The people of the third planet called themselves humans. Their world was Earth. Their star was Sol. They had known about the Empire for 7 months, since the first contact with the Persistent, and they had spent that time studying intercepted communications, movement patterns, protocols, and what little they could observe from distance. They were not frightened. That did not appear as a sentence anywhere in the translation, but Shra felt it in every line. No threats, no begging, no performative outrage, just questions arranged with unsettling care. How was the Empire governed? How were member worlds represented? What rights did independent civilizations have near Imperial territory? What was the Empire's military doctrine regarding unregistered vessels? Then came the question Shra read 3 times. Did the Empire possess a formal process for recognizing and negotiating with civilizations that did not intend to join it? Not protection, not membership, recognition. The chief linguist leaned closer to the translation and whispered, "They know exactly what they want." Shra looked through the bridge glass toward the distant blue world and the 217 human structures circling it. "Yes," she said, "they want parity." Nobody corrected her. On Earth, Petty Officer Danny Reeves sat in the Geneva building with cold coffee, tired eyes, and a growing respect for alien diplomatic caution. The Kelari response to the recognition question had not said yes. It had not said no. It had performed the ancient political maneuver of surrounding the answer with procedure until nobody could accuse it of being absent. Reeves marked the passage with an annotation. Translation: they are asking their bosses. What interested her more was what the Kelari did not ask. They did not ask how many human warships existed. They did not ask what weapons the Persistent had used. They did not ask how a civilization that had been flying atmospheric craft 230 years ago now possessed orbital yards, colonies, and vessels that could tear apart Imperial cruisers. They avoided every question that would reveal how carefully they were trying not to look afraid. Reeves filed the note, stood, and walked to the break room. Someone had pinned 2 printed transcripts to the wall as a joke nobody fully laughed at anymore. One was the Kelari first contact message. "We mean no harm. We ask only to speak." The other was the last known status update from the Persistent before it came home. Reeves looked at both pages for a moment. The Persistent was back in dock. Commander Elias Voss had testified for 12 hours. The official report was sealed above Reeves's clearance, but unofficial words moved through secure buildings faster than authorized files. 7 alien ships destroyed. Significant damage taken. Every human crew member was brought home alive. Reeves read the Kelari line again. "Bit late for that," she said to nobody, then went back to work. For weeks after arriving at the edge of Sol, Shra received Grand Senator Voritha's encrypted instruction. "Find out what they want and whether we can give it to them without losing face." She read it twice, in her private cabin. Outside her viewport, Earth's system moved with quiet confidence. Cargo vessels crossed between stations. Mining ships burned toward the asteroid belt. Civilian traffic flowed so steadily it began to feel less like a deployment map and more like weather. Somewhere among it was the Persistent, docked at a station called Waypoint 3, being repaired. The humans had told her that, without being asked. They had also told her it was not pointed at anyone. That was not naivety. That was pressure disguised as transparency. Shra understood it perfectly. They were giving her facts she could carry home to a frightened Senate. The ship is docked. The commander is alive. The weapon is visible. The hand is open. She had never met a civilization that learned diplomacy this quickly. She stepped onto the bridge. "Open a channel," she said. Holt looked up. "To Earth." "To Earth," Shra said. "It is time to ask for a meeting in person." The meeting did not happen on Earth. That was the first human condition. It did not happen aboard the Careful Word either. That was the second. Ambassador Shra understood both decisions. A home world was not a reception hall. A foreign ship was not neutral. Trust had not been built yet. And humans, she was learning, did not confuse hope with security. So they chose Waypoint 7. The station sat at Earth's L4 point, gray, practical, and without ceremony. It had docking rings, fuel tanks, maintenance corridors, storage bays, and a habitation section that smelled of recycled air, machine oil, and coffee. The xenobiologist later wrote that coffee appeared to be a stimulant consumed in quantities that exceeded biological necessity and entered the realm of ritual. Shra arrived with 4 people. Vel, her chief linguist, who had studied human language until the medical officer suggested sleep as a professional obligation. Coral, the Draith behavioral analyst, who watched everything and said almost nothing. Holt, her first officer, and Pell, a junior diplomat whose hands were already tight around his pen. The humans arrived with 5. 3 were diplomats. Shra recognized that immediately. Diplomats were a species of their own, no matter what biology carried them. Still hands, measured steps, faces trained not to react before the mind had finished calculating the cost. Their lead was Director Amara OSI, small, composed, close-cropped gray hair, and the stillness of a person who had spent decades sitting across from difficult problems without giving them visible fear. The 4th human was Dr. Yusef Brandt, Xenolinguistics. He was young, bright-eyed, and apologized almost immediately for looking excited. "I am trying to be appropriately solemn," he said, "but this is professionally impossible." Vel laughed. The sound surprised everyone, including Vel. Something loosened in the room. Not trust. Not yet. Only the upper layer of ice cracking. The 5th human did not need introduction. He wore civilian clothes, as promised. No uniform. No rank insignia. But when he entered, his eyes moved once across the room and took the exits, corners, sight lines, distances, and hands. Then his expression settled. The scar along his left jaw made recognition unnecessary. Director OSI introduced him anyway. Commander Elias Voss, currently on administrative leave. Advisory capacity. Shra looked at him for exactly as long as politeness allowed. He looked back for exactly the same length of time. They both understood his presence. The humans were not hiding the Persistent. They were not pretending that it was a misunderstanding that could be buried under language. Voss sat in the room like the debris field sat in every report Shra had sent home, acknowledged by presence, not by apology, not yet. They took their seats at a flat rectangular table with water vessels and small salted biscuits placed between them. Dr. Brandt explained that biscuits were culturally mandatory in meetings of this kind, though he admitted he was not certain why. Correlate 1. His expression did not change. Shra began with the statement she had revised 7 times. She described the Empire, its history, its membership, its laws, and its process for bringing new civilizations into the Imperial structure. Director OSI listened without interruption. When Shra finished, OSI said, "Thank you. That was very clear." Then she asked the question Shra had expected. "How voluntary is membership?" Shra gave the prepared answer. Consultation, negotiation, rights of member worlds, representation under law. OSI listened. And if a civilization declines... A small pause entered the room. Coral noticed it. Shra knew he noticed it. "There have been cases," she said, "where civilizations at early stages are given time to develop before membership is formally raised." "That is not quite what I asked." No one moved. Shra held OSI's gaze. "No," she said. "No civilization formally approached by the Empire has declined membership." OSI wrote something down. The sound of her pen was very soft. Second question. The ships sent to intercept the persistent, were they sent to escort or to destroy? Shra explained protocol, escalation, refusal, resistance, and the legal chain that had carried the decision upward. As she spoke, she looked once at Voss. He did not blink. OSI nodded when Shra finished, but it was not an agreement. It was storage. Then she folded her hands. "Ambassador, Earth is small compared to your empire. 8 billion people against 700 billion across 300 worlds. We understand the scale difference. Yet you sent a diplomatic mission instead of another fleet. You have treated this as an equal conversation. So I want to ask directly, what do you actually want from us?" The room went still. Shra chose the truth. "Understanding." "Of what?" "Of you." She let the words rest. "The Empire has models for civilization, development, expansion, fear, ambition, collapse. You do not fit them. 230 years ago, our scouts found atmospheric flight. Now you have orbital infrastructure, colonies, and a vessel whose propulsion and weapons our engineers cannot explain." For the first time, Voss shifted. OSI noticed. "You are telling us our technology frightened your Senate." "Yes," Shra said. OSI's expression remained calm. "Then I should give you more accurate information." Shra felt the pressure change before the words came. "Earth is not the only human world." Pell stopped writing. "We have 17 established colonies." OSI continued. "For our inside what your charts call Imperial outer territory. They have been there for 30 to 60 years. We did not ask permission because we did not know you existed. I am telling you now because we would rather you hear it from us than find a settlement and make another assumption." Shra kept her face steady because 30 years of diplomacy demanded it. Inside, the report to Vorith was already becoming impossible. OSI touched the table display. A star chart appeared. "These are 8 human vessels currently in deep space. Positions, headings, missions, as of 48 hours ago." Shra looked at the data. Exploration, mining survey, long-range probe, patrol. She looked back at OSI. "You are showing this voluntarily." "Yes," OSI said. "Trust is built in specific ways. We are showing you where our ships are, telling you about our colonies, and telling you about capabilities before you feel compelled to test them again." Her voice did not harden. That made the sentence colder. "We would prefer not to destroy any more of your ships, Ambassador. It creates paperwork on both sides." Holt made a small sound and strangled it quickly. Voss spoke for the first time. "The battle group at KTH," he said. "The crew, did they have families?" The question landed differently from every strategic exchange before it. Shra looked at him. "Yes, most of them." Voss looked down at the table. When he raised his eyes again, his face had not changed, but something behind it had. "I am sorry," he said, "that I could not have done it differently." Silence filled the room. "The decision to send them was not yours," Shra said. "No," Voss answered, "but I was the one who fired." Nobody had an answer for that. Later, when the meeting ended, Shra paused by the door. Commander. Voss looked up. The Persistent, she said. Our translators argued about the name. Enduring was one version. He waited. But another translation may be better. What was it? Shra held his gaze. The one that comes back. Then she left him sitting alone at the Ambassador Shra's report reached Centaur Prime before the careful word completed its next orbital scan. Grand Senator Vorith read it alone first. He read about the meeting room on Waypoint 7, the human director who asked questions with the calm precision of a blade, the voluntary star chart, the 17 colonies, the 4 settlements already inside Imperial outer territory, and Commander Elias Voss apologizing for the dead without apologizing for surviving. Then Vorith read the final paragraph twice. They are not trying to frighten us. That is either the most reassuring thing about them or the most frightening. I have not yet decided which. He closed the report and went down 12 levels. The emergency chamber waited with the patience of stone. For 11 days, the Senate argued beneath Centaur Prime. The same screens stayed lit. The same recycled air moved through the chamber. The same 47 senators circled the same fear until it grew teeth. Senior Senator DRA of the Veth led the hardline bloc. She was older than Vorith, old enough to remember border conflicts, where restraint had looked noble in the opening minutes and foolish in the casualty reports. She sat with both hands on the table, unmoving, as if she had brought a verdict instead of an argument. Humans are not a future threat, DRA said. They are a present. She listed the facts, like charges. 1 human ship had destroyed 7 Imperial vessels. Human colonies had existed inside Imperial territory for decades without detection. Human weapons could not be replicated by Imperial engineers. Human ships were moving through sectors the Empire considered mapped, owned, and safe. Every sentence tightened the room. Her solution was simple. Strike first. Not on Earth. Not yet. The home system was too unknown, too dense, too dangerous. Strike the 4 colonies in Imperial space. Occupy them under the legal authority of territorial violation. Use them as leverage. Force recognition negotiations to happen with Imperial hands already on human ground. Vorith listened and felt the old sickness of history repeating itself in better language. We have 1 engagement, he said. 1 data point. DRA turned toward him. 1 data point that cost us 7 ships and 142 crew. Yes, Vorith said, which is exactly why I am not eager to learn what a 2nd data point costs. The chamber murmured. DRA did not raise her voice. That is fear speaking. Vorith looked at the frozen image of the Undying Reach, still available on one side screen, because no one had dared remove it. No, he said, that is arithmetic. But arithmetic did not calm frightened governments. On the 12th day, DRA called for a vote. Vorith already knew she had the numbers. He had spent 3 days pulling at her coalition, offering delays, inspections, legal reviews, anything that might give Shra more time at the table with the humans. He needed 4 senators to change sides. He got 2. The motion passed 26 to 21. Not a full invasion. Dora had given the moderates that consolation. It would be called a containment action. 6 battle groups, 42 ships. They would move simultaneously on the 4 human colonies, occupy them, and hold them pending a satisfactory settlement of recognition and territorial status. If the humans complied, the colonies would be returned. If they did not, the motion left that sentence unfinished. Vorith stood slowly. I want my objection entered into the record. I consider this action strategically unsound and diplomatically catastrophic. When the outcome is known, the record will show this chamber was warned. No one met his eyes. 14 hours later, Shra received her orders aboard the Careful Word. She read them in her sealed cabin. Continued diplomatic contact. Schedule the next session. Keep the humans engaged as long as possible. The containment force would move while the conversation was still open. By the time the humans learned their colonies had been seized, it would already be done. Shra sat very still. After 30 years as a diplomat, the Senate had finally found a new word for her. Distraction. She thought of Director OSI's careful hands. The star chart was offered voluntarily. The line was spoken without threat. We would prefer not to destroy any more of your ships, Ambassador. Then she thought of Voss looking down at the table. I was the one who fired. Shra picked up her secure communicator and sent one message to Voreth. I will follow the Senate's order. I want it noted for the record that I believe this will not end the way the Senate expects. She paused, then added one more line. I believe the humans will know before our ships arrive. She did not know how. That was the part that frightened her most. Petty Officer Danny Reeves found the war before it reached anyone. It did not arrive as a message. It did not arrive with an alien voice, a flag, or a declaration. It arrived as a flaw in the background noise. For tiny changes in deep space sensor density. For wakes where large objects had punched through faster than light transit. For points that meant nothing until Reeves overlaid them with the colonial registry. Then they meant everything. Brennan, Holloway, Eastmere, Kestrel Drift. For human colonies, inside the territory, the Kelari Empire had only recently informed humanity it considered Imperial outer space. Reeves checked the pattern once, then twice, then a third time, because nobody wanted to be the person who woke governments over a bad overlay. The result did not change. The ships had already left Kelari space. Based on what Earth had learned from watching the careful word, they had departed 14 days earlier, 3 days before Ambassador Shra scheduled the next diplomatic session. Reeves hit the alarm. The Geneva building filled like a wound opening. The deputy director arrived in 4 minutes. A general arrived at 7. Director OSI came at 3 in the morning, not looking as if she had been asleep, but as if she had been waiting for bad news to become official. She read the analysis in silence. How confident. Reeves kept her voice steady. Large-scale fleet movement. Multiple ships on vectors aligned with all 4 colonies. Minimum estimate, 30. Could be more. How long? 46 hours. No one spoke. 46 hours for 4 civilian settlements built by people who had gone to the edge of known space because humans had always done that. Farmers under sealed domes. Engineers in ice tunnels. Children born beneath strange moons who had never seen Earth except in school footage. Director OSI asked for Commander Voss. He arrived 20 minutes later in civilian clothes. He looked at the map for a long time, and the silence around him changed shape. The colonies are not military targets, he said. No, the general answered. Civilians? Yes. What assets do we have in range? The deployment map appeared. 2 cargo ships, armed against pirates. 1 patrol vessel. That was all. Voss stared at the numbers, and for a moment he was back at KTH, on a damaged bridge with alarms buried under smoke. Lieutenant Quan running calculations, while the persistent bled atmosphere from one sealed compartment, and kept moving because stopping had never been the point. What is a patrol vessel? The Steadfast, the general said. Vance class. Crew of 91. Commander G.I. Park. Voss nodded slowly. She has outer rim experience. OSI watched him. Can one patrol vessel stop a fleet? Voss did not pretend. No. The answer landed hard. Then he looked back at the colony markers. But it can make the fleet choose in public. OSI understood before anyone else did. The Senate had turned diplomacy into a screen. Humanity would turn restraint into a weapon. I am contacting Ambassador Shra, OSI said. The room reacted at once. That would be a message, the deputy director warned. Yes, OSI said. Not a threat, not a demand, a chance. She looked at the map. We need to know whether she is part of this or being used by it. Then she looked at Voss. Talk to Park. About what? About whether one ship can do what 46 hours requires. Voss left without another word. The message to Shra was short, stripped of accusation because accusation wasted time. We know. Your fleet is moving to our colonies. Were you aware when you scheduled the session? On the careful word, Shra read it alone. For one moment, her face did not move. Then she sent 3 sentences that changed the shape of the crisis. It is an order. I did not know when I scheduled the session. I know now. Do what you need to do. I will do what I can from here. After sending it, she sat beneath the quiet lights of her cabin and felt 30 years of service narrowed into a single unbearable truth. Obedience and loyalty were not always the same thing. The hardest part came after the ship stopped. No weapons fired. No colony burned. No human child beneath Brennan's sealed sky ever learned how close the horizon had come to opening with an Imperial landing craft. The 42 Kelari ships held position in the dark, engines low, weapons cold. Orders suspended by a message from Centaur Prime that Fleet Admiral Soros read twice before allowing herself to breathe. On the bridge of the Steadfast, Commander G.I. Park did not celebrate. She sat in her command chair, with one hand still resting beside the broadcast control, as if the message she had sent were a physical thing that might need holding in place. Nobody had chosen to be enemies yet. That choice is still ahead of us. The words remained in every recording, every diplomatic archive, every military review that followed. The Empire would study them as doctrine. Humanity would file them as evidence. Park only heard them as the sound of 91 crew members waiting to see whether they would die slowly enough for the colonies to evacuate. A message arrived from the Imperial flagship. We are holding positions. No action against the colonies will be taken at this time. Park read it. Her navigator exhaled too loudly and looked embarrassed by the noise. Her weapons officer closed his eyes. Park looked past them through the forward viewport, where the lights of Brennan Colony burned small and domestic against the planet below. Log the response, she said. Her voice was steady. Only her hand shook. On the careful word, Ambassador Shra watched the same update appear on her cabin display. Fleet holding. Colonies untouched. No shots fired. For a moment, she did nothing. Then she lowered herself into the chair as if gravity had changed. Voritha's reply came 6 minutes later, transmitted through an emergency Senate channel he had no authority to use for personal reassurance. You were right. Shra looked at those 3 words for a long time. They did not feel like victory. They felt like standing on a cracked bridge and hearing the first stone fall without knowing whether the rest would follow. 2 days later, the second meeting took place on Waypoint 7. No biscuits were touched this time. Director OSI sat across from Shra with the stillness of a person who had already decided where the conversation needed to go and was prepared to walk there even if the floor gave way. Commander Voss was present again. So was Commander Park. She looked younger than Shra had expected, which made the image of the Steadfast between 42 ships and 12,000 civilians harder to put into a diplomatic category. Shra began. The containment order has been suspended. The fleet will withdraw from the colonial approach vectors pending Senate review. OSI did not thank her. Not yet. That is not enough. No, Shra said. It is not. The honesty moved through the room more sharply than any polished statement could have. OSI placed a document on the table display. It was not long. Its brevity was part of its force. Formal recognition of human sovereignty, immediate withdrawal of Imperial forces from all human colony approach zones, mutual notification protocols for ships crossing claimed operational space, a non-aggression framework, joint investigation of the KTH engagement, direct Senate-level negotiations without threat, seizure, or leverage. Shra read every line. Then she read them again. I can take this to the Senate. she said. OSI watched her. Will you argue for it? Shra looked at Park, then at Voss, then at the document between them. Yes. Park spoke quietly. Ambassador, can I ask you something? Shra turned to her. Your message to Admiral Soros. Park said. The order to hold. Did it come because you believed we could win, or because you believed firing would make everyone lose? Shra had spent 30 years answering questions without revealing more than she intended. This time, no answer came ready. She looked down at her folded hands. She thought of the undying reach breaking apart in 11 seconds. She thought of Voss, asking whether the crew had families. She thought of the Steadfast, too small to matter tactically and too visible to ignore morally. When Shra looked up, her voice was lower. Because I finally understood what your ship was doing. Park waited. You were not blocking a fleet, Shra said. You were giving us one last place to stop. For the first time since the careful word had entered Seoul, Shra saw Commander Voss look away, not from shame, from recognition. The vote on Centaur Prime came 11 days later. It was not clean. Nothing honest was. DRA voted against the proposal and said nothing afterward, which Vorith found more troubling than a speech. 8 senators abstained. 29 voted in favor. Formal recognition negotiations would begin. When the message arrived in Geneva, Reeves was on shift. She ran the translation twice, because habit had become a kind of prayer. Then she walked it to the deputy director's office. He read it, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. Go get OSI. OSI read the message in the doorway, coat still on, one hand resting on the frame. They want to begin formal talks, Reeves said. I can read, OSI said. Yes, ma'am. OSI held the page a moment longer than necessary. Then she said, Get me Ambassador Shra. She paused. Tell her I said thank you. Reeves returned to her desk and entered the message into the official record. Highest priority. Permanent archive. First formal recognition of contact between Earth and the Kelari Empire. Then she looked at the breakroom wall, where the first Kelari transmission still hung, faded under fluorescent light. We mean no harm. We ask only to speak. She thought of the fleet holding in the dark. She thought of Park asking a question instead of firing. She thought of Voss apologizing for the dead without surrendering the truth. She thought of Shra breaking the spirit of her orders to preserve the possibility of peace. None of it fit the Empire's models. None of it had stopped because the models failed. Reeves filed her final annotation, marked the record complete, and put on her coat. Outside, Geneva morning was cold and clear. Above the cloud cover, beyond the atmosphere, beyond every chart that had once called humanity primitive, ships were moving, records were opening, and 2 civilizations were stepping into a history neither of them could control. Reeves walked toward the transit station. Behind her, the building with no name locked its doors.